let's dive into grant writing. Grant writing is a really important skill you're going to want to work on if you're going to be a self-employed, self-driven artist, especially if you're going to be producing albums, starting new arts initiatives, educational projects. There's a lot of money out there for artists of all kinds, with all kinds of ideas from all kinds of backgrounds. And if you know how to write a good grant proposal, you're going to be very well funded. Now, not all grants are going to pay for all of the expenses related to your album per se. Maybe you're going to have to kick in a certain amount of money, but it definitely helps to have a certain portion of whatever you're trying to do funded so that you can put it out there. It can seem really daunting to write a grant proposal, and even I go through the, I'll never get it kind of headspace, but you don't know unless you try. And hopefully this video is going to shed some light on the components of a good grant proposal. Let's talk about the foundations that are potentially going to supply you with the funding that you're going to be asking for. Grant foundations are often nonprofit organizations, which means they're charities unto themselves. In another video, I discussed for-profit and nonprofit companies. Go back and watch that video because you'll get a little bit of background information there. Grant foundations are businesses themselves, and they run adhering to a certain mission or a mission statement. They have a singular goal or focus. They want some community engagement with the arts, or they want to promote music education, or they want to help artists record and release new music or tour with their band. And this singular focus is really, really important when you are lining up what you're going to say in your grant proposal. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And grant foundations also have their own expectations. When they supply an artist with money to do something, they're expecting that you are more or less going to do the thing that you said you were going to do in your grant proposal. So it's important to set realistic goals for yourself, because at the end of the project cycle, you'll most likely have to file a report that states what you did with the money, and hopefully what you say is going to be pretty much in line with what you said you were going to do initially. Now, before we talk about the specifics of writing a good grant proposal, let's talk a little bit about what these grant foundations are going to be looking for in your application. So first of all, the application is going to be read by several panelists or a board. These people are either associated with the grant foundation, or maybe they are experts in that particular subject matter and have been asked to read all the applicants' applications and give their opinion and weigh in on who should be receiving the money. I have been on many of these panels before, and I have read thousands of pages of grant proposals. So take it from me when I'm telling you these are the things that panelists are going to be looking for in your application. They want to make sure you made the deadline. Occasionally they will give concessions for extenuating circumstances, but by and large, you're held to the same standard as anybody else applying for the money. And if you don't make that deadline, sorry. They're also looking for a well-written proposal. A lot of times artists hire someone to write their grant proposals for them because artists are not necessarily great writers. I mean, good writing skills should be something that is just in your wheelhouse in general, but this is kind of a little bit deeper than just writing your bio or a simple paragraph. You really got to know what you're trying to say and how to say it in a really well-written way, which includes good grammar. I've read dozens, if not hundreds, of proposals for the National Endowment for the Arts Artworks grants, and I'd be surprised how many grammatical mistakes I would see in these proposals, especially for something as prestigious as the National Endowment for the Arts. You can have somebody proofread for you. Do that. Your budget has to be very honest, it has to be well laid out and very, very clear and logical. And also you're going to be submitting maybe a proof of concept. You're going to be submitting materials that are going to show at least an idea of your art or the things that you've done in the past. You want really good quality video, good quality audio. You want to make sure links work, and you want to make sure that you select the best possible snippets. I guarantee you nobody's going to be sitting there watching the entirety of a 15-minute video. It's just not going to happen. We're going to look at snippets. So make sure you choose the best stuff, the best quality stuff. So now let's dive into a little bit of an overview about writing a grant proposal. One of the things that you want to make sure that you adhere to is a singular focus. You want clarity in your proposal. Are you a multifaceted artist who does a million different things? You sure are. But when you're applying for funding, you're only going to confuse the person reading if you try to incorporate too many angles in what you're trying to do. If your album project has spoken word and mixed media art and puppetry and chances are that proposal's going to seem a little bit watered down and unfocused. So keep it simple. You also want your proposal to be personal, but not too personal. If you have a story about your upbringing or how maybe a certain type of music has influenced you personally, that's great. And again, you want it to be well worded, with good grammar, professionally written. Your budget needs to be honest and accurate. I remember looking through the budget of a nonprofit jazz organization that had applied for one of the Artworks grants and seeing that they were spending like 60 or 70% of their entire annual budget on their CEO's salary. That's a huge portion of some organization's budget to be paying one person. And they were asking for all of this money for an entire program that didn't even add up to the amount of money that one person was being paid, which was a huge red flag for us on the panel. So you want to review your budget. You want to make sure that wherever you're spending your money is like appropriate. You also want to make sure that the ultimate goal that you're seeking to achieve with this money is like reasonable and achievable. You don't want to be like, okay, yeah, the goal here is to release a double record and tour the world and then also get 12 Grammy nominations and all of this stuff. It's like, okay, yeah, dream big, but for the purposes of this grant that you're going to be getting, what is the end game here? How are you going to get from point A to point B in a logical, reasonable sense? Remember we talked about these grant foundations are businesses unto themselves, and they're often nonprofit organizations with their own mission statement. Make sure that your proposal aligns with the mission of the organization. Do your homework, read the website, look at the mission statement for the organization, and use key words and philosophies from that mission in your application. The more closely aligned your project is with the ideals of the organization, the better chances you are of being funded. And like I said before, make the deadline. In fact, don't send it in at 11:58 p.m. like the night before it's due. Send it in a couple of days before. I know firsthand that if you send in an application early and it might be missing a PDF or something didn't upload quite right, the people looking at the uploaded materials are going to like flag it and be like, hey dude, you forgot this, or hey, your budget looks all jumbled, resend. You might get an opportunity to fix something. So be early with your deadline. So let's look at some grant question do's and don'ts. Let's say you're applying for a grant to record an album that pays homage to the great pianist composer Thelonious Monk. And the foundation is offering $10,000 to artists who write a grant proposal and will be chosen to be funded to create an album, to create a project, maybe do a couple of shows with that money. Here are some questions that you might see on the application. Grant question 1. How has the genius of Thelonious Monk's music impacted you as a composer? Here are some do's and don'ts when answering this question. Talk a little bit about your history as a composer and musician, and make sure you lean on some of the most recent relevant stuff. Yeah, you can go back into your childhood and your upbringing if it's pertinent to the question, but don't hover on, oh, I was in the All-State Festival and then I did essentially Ellington and then all of this stuff. It's okay, that's cool, but talk about the more relevant things that you're doing now and that might have something to do with Thelonious Monk or your compositional prowess. How did you come to hear about Monk? How did his music start to impact your life? How did you just discover his genius? And also be specific. Talk about specific pieces that he wrote or albums that inspired you. This shows that you know what you're talking about and that his music is directly influencing your future work and the work that will be potentially funded by this grant. Here are some don'ts. Don't drop tons of names to sound impressive. Yeah, you shared the stage with X, Y, and Z. If it's relevant to the grant, great. If it's not, don't put it in there. We're not impressed. Don't spell Monk's name wrong. And don't spell the name of the grant foundation wrong if you're going to put that in there. Double check your spelling. This happens regularly. I kid you not. Also, don't answer another grant question in this grant question, which can be easy to do. Because sometimes in these grant applications, the questions can kind of be a little bit similar. So you really have to kind of unpack what are you going to say in this question as opposed to this question and make it align with that particular question. It's easy to go on a tangent, stay on topic. And then also, you don't need to give a history of Monk's music. You're assuming that the panel knows at least certain things about Monk and is privy to his music and his background. You don't need this to be a history lesson. The question needs to be about you and how Monk's music impacted you as a composer. Let's look at another question. Where do you plan on performing with your Monk project once it is complete? Here are some do's. Zero in on a handful of venues that sound practical. Perhaps in your hometown. If you have an easy in with certain venues, mention those. Focus on venues that are a match. Obviously, if you're going to write a bunch of music that's Thelonious Monk inspired, you're probably not going to play like Sally's Blues and Barbecue Friday Blues Bash or something like that. Like find venues that are a match. Do mention clubs, but also festivals, concert series, or venues with funding. You're going to use some of this money to get your band on a stage for sure, and sometimes those stages pay and sometimes they don't pay very well. But you're going to have to do some of your homework here in order to get this thing fully funded and make sure that you are realistic in terms of how much money you actually have for this project. So make sure you research venues that might have funding to pay you guys to perform, so that not everything you're doing is riding on the money that you're getting from this. And also, be open to educational opportunities. Grant foundations love education and community engagement. Don't ignore these aspects. These are hugely, highly fundable aspects of a grant proposal. So if you can logically and genuinely incorporate some kind of an educational thing, like a workshop or some kind of a performance with students or some kind of a guest artist thing, a lecture or something somewhere, that is definitely a leg up in these proposals. Some don'ts. Don't drop big venue names just because. Oh, I want to play the Blue Note Tokyo, and then I'm going to do Dazzle Jazz, and then we're going to do the Newport Jazz Festival, and then we're going to do North Sea. It's like, no. Yes, okay, dream big, but also it's just like it's a stretch. It's a big stretch. Don't cast too wide of a net. Okay, you want to do a show in Honolulu, but then 2 days later you're going to be in Florida and then you're going to be up in Canada. It's like, you got to really think logistically here. Also, don't focus on only clubs or risky venues. Like I said, look for venues that have some kind of a funding or some kind of backing or some kind of guarantee that you know you're going to get, so that you can be wise about the amount of budget that's realistic for this project and for the project outcome, more importantly, because the grant wants to see you actually see it through. A little bit about the grant budget. Make sure it's organized. Use a spreadsheet. I can't tell you how many times someone has submitted a budget to me on a Word document, on a PDF, as a narrative. You want an actual spreadsheet. And you can do this on Google Sheets or Excel, and there are other programs that are programs for free that you can use. Learn how to do a spreadsheet. Make sure your budget is honest and realistic. Make sure it is accurate. Obviously, some things are going to change dollar to dollar, but if your budget says your studio is going to cost $100 for the day, that's not accurate. It's probably going to cost more like $1,000 or $1,500 for a day, depending on the studio that you're going to be using. Make sure your budget is believable, detailed. Think about every cost. Even if you're going to be buying lunch for the band, that is a legitimate expense. And don't forget to pay yourself. These grant foundations don't expect these artists to be a martyr for their projects. Earmark 10 up to maybe 15 to 20% of a grant budget for yourself as the composer. It depends on how much money you're making and what the scope of the grant is, or if you have funding coming from other sources. But it's okay to have some kind of a fee for yourself in there, in the budget. Like, we want to see that. Like, you have to eat. And then also, is the grant covering your entire budget? Are you doing more fundraising? Make sure you have a segment about that. There might even be a paragraph where they might have you answer, like, what other sources of funding are you looking for? Are you going to be fronting any of your personal money? Do you have, any other grants or whatever? Like make sure that is mentioned in the budget, or at least anticipated. If you don't have the money yet, that's okay. But even if you're projecting a certain amount of income to come in, you should probably put that in your budget, just so you get a good, so that the panelists have a good scope of what actually is realistic here. And then, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, this grant foundation is going to ask you to file a report at the end of your project, usually in a year or two after it's done. And they want to see what you did with the money. These organizations are not expecting you to be absolutely, nailed your plan from point A to point B exactly how you did it. Your budget might have changed. You might not have released as many tracks on the album as you thought. Maybe you didn't go to that venue that you said you were going to go to, but you want to document everything. Your follow-up should contain documentation of your experience, some narratives about how your project evolved. If it wasn't exactly how you planned, that's totally okay. We just want to know about it. Did you meet your key goals? And then were there some goals that you did not meet? Again, that's all okay. We just want to know what you did and what worked and what didn't work. And then also, you want to make sure you have links to your work, whether you release something commercially or you have YouTube videos of the studio session or social media links, just documentation so that we can see what you did with the money that we gave you, and that also we can share that in our circles. And I say our, like I have a grant foundation, but like I'm saying as a panelist or someone who, is a part of a grant foundation, that grant foundation wants to see that work and wants to be able to share it in their social media channels too. So it's important that that documentation is there. And then, of course, gratitude. A thank you goes a long way. Thank you so much for helping me create this dream of a project. Thank you so much for helping me advance my career, something along those lines. And keep in touch with the foundation. You never know, you might be able to reapply for another grant in the future. So that gratitude really does go a long way. It takes practice to get good at writing grant proposals. A lot of it is trial and error, but hopefully some of the points in this video have given you a little bit of clarity and encouragement and direction as to the nuts and bolts of how this all kind of comes together. Homework. Talk with other colleagues who have successfully won grants, and maybe they'll let you read what they wrote. Also, in terms of like your writing acumen, read books. Like, I can't stress how important that is. Read books, read articles, read fiction, read nonfiction. Reading is going to help your writing. And as a working musician who's going to be trying to fund your projects, you're going to be doing a lot of writing, whether it's for grant proposals or whether you're going to be writing about your projects for your website or for press releases. You want to have some writing skills. So really start reading. It's really that simple. And also, continually document your work. Document gigs that you do. Take videos. Put them on your social media. Do little video compilations and put them on YouTube. You never know when something like that is going to come in handy for grant proposals, because it's evidence that you do what you do and you do it so well. Happy grant writing, and I'll see you in the next video.